So round 3 of the Rugby Championship is done. Do we need to reset all our preconceptions about these Southern Hemisphere teams? And I thought you were going to score.
Ask a better question, you get a better answer.
Hi guys, welcome back. I am joined once again by my favourite Kiwi, Zach. How you doing?
That's high praise, Rich. I'm doing well, thank you.
Obviously behind Richie McCaw, because that is the law in New Zealand. He's everyone's favourite Kiwi. But yeah, thanks for joining me. We're going to have a quick chat through round 3 of the Rugby Championship, because once again, it was just absolutely fascinating stuff, especially myself, as a neutral watching on. It's just so interesting to see the dynamics between these 4 teams and the balances of power shifting around. So that's going to be really interesting to get into. And then we're going to have a deep dive, I believe, into the New Zealand-Argentina game, and more specifically, where does this leave the All Blacks once again? And that's going to be on your channel, Zach, Hakatine Rugby. So do get over to Zach's channel, Hakatine Rugby, subscribe to that, because this is going to be in kind of 2 parts. But yeah, let's go for it. I'm going to start, Zach, if I may, with a couple of statements, and let me know if there's any of those you want to agree with or disagree with. Because, we've had 3 rounds of the Rugby Championship, and obviously we've had games before this as well. But firstly, do we need to reset our, expectations, our preconceptions about New Zealand? I mean, I don't subscribe to the fact that they are a bad team, but are they now just a tier 1 team alongside everyone else, and rather than the kind of level above that they have been in the past? So is that one statement there? Second statement, South Africa have had periods in every game where they've completely dominated possession, but they've had a couple of games where they really haven't converted that to points. Is that their big issue? Australia, in the past, I've certainly said in years gone by, maybe up front they're a little bit vulnerable, but they're dangerous in the backs. Has that changed now? Are they now, a hard team up front? Is that the new norm for them? And Argentina, are they simply no longer the weak man of the Rugby Championship? Are they 4 amongst equals? So they're my 4 statements, Zach. Anything you want to get into there?
Oh, shall we start with the first of those? So have the All Blacks sort of come back into the pack, or sort of more seen as tier 1 nation? I would think on the balance of results this year, you would have to say yes, right? So in all of these games, there's just these issues with errors, now with discipline, with inability to close out games. I do think they're getting closer to the selection profile that will carry them through to the World Cup. So there's certainly some, we keep hearing Ian Foster come out with, these are key lessons in the road to the World Cup. At some point, you've got to stop learning lessons and start winning games, I guess. But the same old issues are presenting themselves. So it is a lack of continuity, it is errors, it is discipline as well, particularly from Sam Cane, which caught me by surprise somewhat.
Well, I mean, we're going to get into this in loads of detail in your part of the video, so I don't want to tread on your toes, but are you kind of saying, yes, they are a tier 1 team rather than the All Blacks of old?
Until they rectify some of those quick issues that I outlined there, yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's enough confidence there to say that they are equal sort of with the top teams at the moment.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big change, isn't it? That might be something that New Zealand fans need to just get their heads around, I guess. It could be a tricky one. Any of those other statements you agree or disagree with?
Maybe we'll just jump on South Africa. I would say in their positions, they're able to dominate vast periods, but unable to really convert points. As a neutral somewhat watching them play, it is a bit frustrating knowing that they have world-class players in the backline, but they're just not finding ways to get involved in the game. Obviously forward dominated. So, they've got an opportunity to evolve and improve, I think, but they're showing some of their limitations by just focusing on forward dominated play, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other sides of their defenses have really stepped up. They really know what's coming. And for example, Australia, their maul defense has been very good. Defending on their line, they were, soaking up the physicality. So, with South Africa, I think they do need to add something else, something different, something new. But, I have made a note here that I would prefer to have that period of domination and then try and add the detail rather than the other way around. So I don't think it's a bad problem. It's, you want to have that problem if you like, but I think it is something they need to address.
Yeah. Do you want to jump on the other statements? I'll let you lead out, I guess, on the Wallabies side.
I mean, up to you, really. I mean, Australia, I think, up front, they have definitely not turned a corner, but they've just improved, essentially. I think Dave Rennie really focused on that. He says, I want hard men, I want tough men, the guys in the second row. They were just kind of like heavy sluggers. The front row's not getting pushed around at scrum time. So I think they've definitely turned a corner, and now they are equal to any pack in the world rather than a soft point of their team. Is that something you'd agree with?
That's definitely something I'd agree with. I think they've still got a bit of inconsistency in their game. Obviously, we saw them go down, win one in Argentina, lose one in Argentina, and now come back and beat the Springboks at home. So once they start to rectify some of those consistency issues and play a bit more of sort of complete game, I think they can really threaten the top teams. But similarly to the All Blacks, I mean, they've got some issues they need to plug before they can really be considered in that top tier, I think.
Okay, and the last statement, which was probably the most controversial, I don't know whether it is or not, but are Argentina now equal amongst those other teams in the Rugby Championship, whereas before they were the weaker team? Have they turned the corner there? Are they now absolute contenders?
It's really difficult to say. I probably lean towards yes. I think more consistently through this Rugby Championship, they have been the form team. Even in that loss to Australia, they showed glimpses of their strengths, obviously. So great defense, really, really strong in defense. They've also, one thing I've noticed is they've got a real ability to turn defense into attack, more so, similarly to what the All Blacks used to do, more so than the All Blacks now. So that's been a sort of noticeable change in their game.
Yeah,
very dangerous. They have 12 points on the board.
Yeah, you're right. I really noticed that. On transition, they call it, when they get a turnover, they're really having a go, aren't they? Big difference rather than playing percentages at that point. So staying on Argentina then, I mean, they're leading the Rugby Championship. The passion is unbelievable. That's probably something they've always had. Have they got the most passion in the Rugby Championship?
Definitely. I think the only rival to their level of passion has been the All Blacks, really, with their backs against the wall at Ellis Park. I think they actually lifted and showed a level of passion that we haven't seen from them in a while, but consistently, Argentina are playing with more passion. And that seems to be deciding games at the moment in the Rugby Championship.
Yeah, it's probably a theme in world rugby at the moment, isn't it? Being able to lift those intensity levels, that big ball carrying, the big tackling seems to be the dominant factor at the moment. And one thing that really impressed me with Argentina, because, I mean, they were very impressive, is they've always been able to hit hard in the tackle, Zach, but the holes always seem to open in the past. In the past against Argentina, if you attack for long enough, holes would open. And at periods there, New Zealand did attack for good periods of time, but the holes just didn't open up, which is something that was really impressed me. I think it's Dave Kidwell is their new defence coach. So, massive praise to him, because the coordination I thought was fantastic.
I completely agree. And he's bringing some of those rugby league sort of structures and defensive mentality into the game. But exactly as you say, they're able to defend for long periods without leaving sort of exposed gaps on the wings. And that seems to be a huge improvement to their game right now.
Anything else really impressed you with Argentina?
Just their ability to accumulate points. I thought they really just, even though they were sort of sniping threes, they were able to just continue to accumulate points, keep in that game. You touched on passion, defense. I really think those are the three factors that won them that game.
Yeah, I mean, Buffelli's kicking was just phenomenal. He's always had a big boot, hasn't he? But his accuracy, he must have improved, because I seem to remember in the past me thinking he'll spray a couple wide. He was nowhere near, and absolutely nailed them there. And their turnovers, their ruck work. Now, we were going to talk a little bit about refereeing at some point, so maybe now is a good time to do it. New Zealand's big gripe was Argentina not releasing the player that's being tackled. Do you agree with that? Do you think New Zealand were just poor at the ruck, or do you think the ref did favour Argentina?
I don't think the refs specifically favoured Argentina, but I have seen a trend that the refs are a little more reluctant to call sort of the tackler releasing the player. There's been a few games this year. It just looks like, the ball player hasn't, or the clean out hasn't had an opportunity to really get in there at the breakdown, or the player hasn't had an opportunity to play the ball. So I think it's more a World Rugby issue than it is any sort of specific Argentina versus New Zealand issue right now.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I think New Zealand, clearly they're not doing well enough at the ruck, because it's something that is coming back to bite them. But I think they're frustrated because it's something they are working on a lot, and it keeps not working. So I think that's something they had a gripe against. But like you say, that is the trend. But something that isn't the trend is refs have been very hot on picking up illegal tackles. And watching back Kurumbeti's tackles at the weekend against South Africa, they did look illegal on replay. I mean, any idea why they weren't picked up? I mean, Kurumbeti is amazing. I love his commitment. He's been playing great, but it does look like those tackles are something that refs have been picking up. And any idea why they weren't?
It's hard to say. I mean, I look at the major talking point, obviously that tackle in the corner. Let's touch on that first. I have seen one angle where it does look like he's slightly extending the arm. I'd probably say you could go either way on that one. 50-50. I don't know how you saw it, but I actually looked at that tackle and thought, well, he beat him to the spot, as in the defender beat the attacker to the spot. I've seen one angle where the arm is lifted, maybe not fully wrapped. So I saw that as a genuine 50-50 call. I wasn't up for that call. But I suppose the bigger issue is the inconsistency with how that type of play is being adjudicated, as you say. So, and let me put it this way: in a Southern Hemisphere contest, to me, that is a play-on activity. In a more broader World Rugby context, so if it was a Northern versus Southern Hemisphere game with a Northern Hemisphere ref, I would say that is called a foul almost every time.
Yeah, I put that in a comment to one of my viewers yesterday, that I think if that had happened in the Northern Hemisphere game, I mean, there were a couple of other tackles he did. I think at least one or two of those would have been penalised, maybe a yellow card. So again, that may be a different inconsistency. With me on referees, Zach, do you know what? I try not to let it wind me up, just because it's not something that players and coaches really can control. And if you let it get you, it can really burn you up. And I know a number of people out there are pretty upset with it, which I understand. Kurumbeti's cover tackle, I mean, I'm laughing because he was going so fast, it was ridiculous. And even on slow-mo, he's going fast. And he is going into him uncontrolled because he's just going so unbelievably fast. Is it illegal? Maybe. But I don't know. I just don't know. At the time, I was just like, that is amazing. Just the commitment. But
we're seeing the two sides of the discussion play out on social media. I sort of lean towards the praise the effort. He beat him to the spot. Great covering tackle. But you do raise a good point. I think how much of that sort of eagerness is actually presenting risk to the attacker, uncontrolled risk, I should say.
Yeah,
there's a case both ways.
Absolutely. So I'm going to leave the reffing there because I think it is a bit of a dead end discussing that. But I think consistency is what people are after, whatever the interpretation. Okay, moving on. Then Australia, they have impressed me, definitely. Like you say, not the consistency maybe is a bit up and down, but they've coped with some injuries really well. Hooper being away, Fraser McWright, goodness me. Hooper Mark II, I called him. What a find. Did he impress you?
Yeah. Oh, very much so. High work rate, great around the track. As you say, Hooper 2.0 or a very good replacement to come in for a Hooper.
Similar physically as well, isn't he? He really is almost a like for like.
Yeah.
Anything impress you about Australia apart from McWright?
I think they've got genuinely two players now that you would consider best in world rugby right now. So Koroibete, obviously 12. I'm high praise on him. On the wing. Also Karevi. So they're starting to build some real lethalness in attack, which is great to see. You touched on the improvements in the forward pack, but they're also starting to build some depth. I do like the selection policy that Rennie is introducing. He's really sort of focusing on guys that are going to fit the mold that he's looking to play in, rather than focus on big names. He's
been very calm and logical, and he's kind of gone through it in quite a gradual way, and his players are now pretty clear, and they're all in that mid-range cap range as well. So it's very much his team, nicely timed to the World Cup. I don't know if they're going to be good enough to win the World Cup, but they're going to be there or thereabouts. I like the way they're building.
Yeah, I think for both Argentina and Australia, and we touched on this in the previous video, but they'll like the side of the draw that they're on. I'll put it that way. I don't know if they can win it, but they can certainly create some waves and go deep into the World Cup with that draw.
Absolutely. Just on Australia, before we move on from them, let's talk about Nick White. I'm laughing because I don't want to get too wound up about these things, because you've got to enjoy your sport, haven't you? Okay, to me, I'll say how I saw it to me. Obviously, we're talking about Faf de Klerk brushing his cheek, whatever it is, fluffing up his moustache. Nick White, not hurt at all, realizing, well, hang on, I'm right next to my own goal line here. I could get a penalty and a yellow card. And he looks at the ref and screams like a footballer going down for a penalty. It's comical, it's disgraceful, whatever you want to call it. But it worked. I mean, my take is it's embarrassing. I was just thinking, would I have ever done that playing? No, I'd have been so embarrassed. I don't think I'd have ever gone back. I'm not sure anyone I'd have played with would have done that, because they'd have been so embarrassed to do it. How is he so not embarrassed to do that? What do you reckon?
I don't know if I can answer that question, but how is he not embarrassed? I don't want that in the game, though, is how I will start to phrase it. We don't want this descending into football-style tactics like that. But right now, we've touched on gamesmanship in the past, Rich. So if you look at the Darcy Swain red card, right? So that was a bit of gamesmanship from Johnny Hill. Now we look at this from Nick White. I sort of look at it and go, they probably gave up one. They probably lost one and got one there. So let's just move on. That being said, I don't really want that in the game.
No.
But it seems to be a bit of a trend.
I think if you'd had, so Nigel Owens, obviously a famous Welsh referee, I think he would have dealt with that slightly differently. I think he would have called that as unsportsmanlike conduct. And that would have been interesting. A more experienced referee, I think, could well have gone, I don't like that. But I think they played it by the book rather than playing it by the spirit, which is in the laws as well, against the spirit of the game. Yeah. Anyway, pop the comments below what you'd have done, how you'd have ref that, because it was interesting. Now, New Zealand, we're going to go on to in detail in the second part of this discussion, so I'm going to leave them for a second and just finish on South Africa. I mean, they started off the Rugby Championship looking $1 million, and now, 2 losses. It's looking tough to get back into it. Where do you see improvements? Do you think it's a little minor blip? Do you think it's a bigger thing? What's your take on South Africa as a whole?
I mean, they've definitely got obviously the game style, game strategy, and the players to turn the corner. I do think back to selections. Joseph Dweeber's name is coming up again, obviously, versus Malcolm Marx. I mean, we've been told there's rugby reasons for those selections. I think it's time for them to cut their losses, start the better man. They seem to be letting teams get away in the last two losses. So there's a quick fix. And I think they just need to use a bit more of their sort of potent backline and variation in attack. It's all looking just a bit too predictable for me right now. What do you think?
Yeah, the first name I've written down here, unfortunately, is Dweeber. I mean, I said in the selection video before the game, he's a very lucky boy. And I think they were just essentially, they're desperate for a third choice hooker. They're trying to build some depth. So they're giving him another game, but it's possibly cost them another game. I'd be amazed if he starts again. We'll see. But I mean, Marks potentially is the best hooker in the world. And when you don't have Mbanambi, not starting him, has possibly cost them. But they're still putting some good South African stuff together. It's just, it does look like teams are just a bit more ready for it now. I don't know, or maybe they're saving all their clever variations for the World Cup, and then all of a sudden people won't have seen what they do. So I don't know. I wouldn't panic at all with them, but definitely a few issues there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. They don't mind, well, to my observation, they don't mind having some, let's say, controversial selection decisions. Game 2 against Wales, obviously Dweeber in the last 2 games in depth in order to focus on the Rugby World Cup. So maybe that's part of the plan, just purely on the selection side of things. I'm not sure. But Ninaba has shown that he does not mind losing games to build depth, or at least sort of,
Yeah, it's just a shame we didn't see Willemse in attack, or Halant we haven't seen at all in attack. That is something they could definitely fix. Okay, last thing of this section then. Round 3 is done. We're halfway through. Who's going to win? Who's looking the favourites? Argentina on top?
I think so. I think they've got they could, and this is where we come back to that passion discussion that we spoke about earlier. Look, if the All Blacks come with anything less than what they were able to produce at Ellis Park, right, backs against the wall type stuff, I believe Argentina will do them again.
And then they're at home, aren't they? Yeah. So if they win next week, they're then at home to South Africa, albeit they have to go away again for the last game. Yeah. If they win next week, they're right in there, aren't they? Absolutely.
Oh, for sure. And that's a winnable game. I mean, as I touched on, errors from the All Blacks, discipline issues. I don't see any quick fix to those problems. So that could certainly play a factor in the next game. And if Argentina are up for it, as they have been for most of these games, then they're in with a real hot shot here. And if they win that game, I believe they go on to win the Rugby Championship.
Wow. Australia have got 2 home games in a row still, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, there is still the mental barrier that they need to get over of the All Blacks. There's no better time than now to really contest the Bledisloe Cup. We'll have to dive deeper on that on another video, Rich. But, the All Blacks are looking vulnerable. Australia's got the first game at home against them. If they're able to win another one against South Africa, go in with confidence at home against the All Blacks, who are really struggling for confidence, game on.
That's crazy, isn't it? That at the moment, Argentina and Australia looking slightly on top, but after round 4, it could all change again, couldn't it?
Exactly. I mean, if I was to predict the outcome of round 4, I would say the Springboks and the All Blacks bounce back.
Yeah. It's making this championship, as good as it's ever been. It really is just a fantastic contest. Absolutely love it. As a neutral, I'm just absolutely loving. I've got no dog in this fight. I don't really mind who wins, who loses. So I'm just enjoying this back and forwards. For you guys who actually support these teams, you must be, losing your hair, losing some sleep. It's, exciting and stressful, but hey, that's rugby, huh?
That's rugby.
Cool. Okay, well, so we're going to carry on this chat on Zach's channel, really deep dive into the All Blacks as well of what's going on there. But thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.